Hey, welcome back everyone. We're here at CPAC talking with Melissa Isaak. She's a family law attorney, and she's also with this new White House Coalition for Men and Boys. Melissa, real pleasure having you on.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us about this movement you have, or this movement for men and boys. What are you doing with this?
You know, you look past over the decades, the feminist movement, of course, has done some good, and it really has gone too far. Because now we're seeing a trend. We're seeing systematic almost destruction of men and boys. They're graduating school at a lesser rate, going to college at a lesser rate. They're being less successful socially, emotionally, academically, you name it. And the focus has really been for all these years on women and girls, and the focus has not been on boys and men. And we need to shift back to everyone, because boys and men are the backbone of our society. Really, they have been, and they're just as important as girls and women.
I assume as a family law attorney, you see a lot of this firsthand. What have you seen that made you want to get behind it?
So, I'm a men's rights attorney, so I limit my representation to men in family court matters and men who are falsely accused and things of that nature. And one thing that we really saw in my practice was that these men would come in and they didn't have restraining orders, and so they would have to leave their house. They'd be, couch surfing, or they would be living in RVs, and they didn't have money to sustain themselves. And the tragic part about that is they didn't even have the money or the resources to provide for their kids or even spend time with their kids. So, one thing that we did is we have this house, and we remodeled the house. It's a 3-bedroom house, a big 85-inch TV. It's like the ultimate dad cave, and we made it to a place where dads can be with their kids, visit with their kids, free of charge. So, and most law firms don't do that. You focus on what they need legally, and that's it. But we're trying to sort of change the model and be that firm that can fill the gaps and provide what these men need. So, and what we saw was just these men are not doing well. They don't rebound as easy from divorces. Their suicide rate is much higher, and of course, more children are left fatherless because of the divorce court system. So, what my firm does is we're trying to change the ideology and change the way that divorce is done.
Now, you mentioned, of course, the feminist movement is having played a role in the kind of destruction of men and boys. What do you see with this? How is this happening?
If you look at removing men from the homes, you can break down the family. I think you weaken society, and that's exactly what's going on. And so, you look at when divorces happen, men are the ones that are traditionally paying child support. Men are the ones that are paying alimony. There's no free, public housing for men. There's very little domestic violence resources for men. Men are really left to fend for themselves. And we're seeing it, certainly, we're seeing the effects of this in the children now. These children who are fatherless. They're grown up and their depression rates are high, anxiety, high school dropouts, substance abuse, teenage pregnancy, runaways, and suicides. You put all these together, and they're the effects of fatherlessness. And so, there's a White House Coalition for Boys and Men, and they're trying to at least get our elected officials to recognize the fact that we need legislation, and we need some protections in there for boys and men, because right now there's nothing. There's a lot of resources for women. Gosh, I can't think of, as a professional woman myself, I can't think of any stumbling block that I came across. Women are more likely, I've read several studies, are more likely to get scholarships than men are. And, a lot of firms want to hire women versus men. So there really needs to be some protections in there for men, because again, there are none.
Now, I know a lot of people would say, oh, how often are men abused? There's this way of thinking, ironically, if we're talking about equality, that equality is really a one-sided thing oftentimes, right? We can say equality in terms of, protecting battered women is one thing, but the idea of protecting battered men, people don't even think this is a thing. How often do you really see that?
Domestic violence against men is a huge problem. Of course, men don't always report domestic violence because there's a social taboo to it. A lot of men are embarrassed, but I can't tell you how many men I've had come to my office with cuts on their heads or black eyes, and things are thrown at them. And it's a way of life for them. They say that they've always done this. Harvard did a study years ago, and up to 70% of certain types of domestic violence are initiated by women. And of course, society tells women You know, if you're a victim of domestic violence, you may not even know you're a victim of domestic violence. You know, we have some people that come in and they say, look, I've never hit my wife, and come to find out later they were actually told by some, you know, legal aid assistance attorney saying, well, you know, if you can claim domestic violence as much as you can kids. So this is a huge problem. But domestic violence for men, most men just don't report it. They don't want to talk about it. They're embarrassed about it, and they feel like less of a man because they were actually abused by a woman. But most men won't hit back. And if they try to defend themselves, for instance, if a woman is hitting them and they just grab her arms to back her up, then all of a sudden police are called, they get arrested for domestic violence. It's very much so a one-way street. There's an old model called the Duluth model, and basically says that women are victims of domestic violence and men are almost always the perpetrators. And this is something that is taught, that, you know, was taught to law enforcement. There's grants that go out for, you know, domestic violence organizations for women. There's nothing for men. Men are expected, I think, even now, just to suck it up. I know I went to court with men with domestic violence, and the judges say, well, I mean, was he hurt? It was just a slap. You know, did it really leave a mark? I said, well, wait a minute, Judge, let's turn this around for a minute. If this was this woman, would you say, man, it was just a slap? They didn't leave a mark. No, they wouldn't. But that's the culture we're dealing with.
You mentioned false allegations. How often do you see false allegations against men? You mentioned that in one case you described that the woman was encouraged to make false allegations for the sake of getting more child rights.
Yes. We see a lot of false allegations. My firm really deals in highly contested litigation, family law litigation. And I would say about 70% of the time, based upon my estimation, we have false allegations of domestic violence. And, you know, thank goodness Alabama's a one-party state, so our clients can record conversations and whatnot, and you would be shocked at the amount of recordings that we get from wives or soon-to-be ex-wives that just say, listen, you know, I'll just call the cops and say that you hit me. And he would say, well, I didn't hit you. Say, it doesn't matter. I'll call and say that you did. But there's that level of confidence in some of these women who are just comfortable being false accusers, and it's a huge problem.
Yeah, you mentioned one-party state. You're referring to recording rights. Is it, you know, one-party consent? In other words, you don't have to have permission to record. It's just for our audience, right?
Yes,
and I know somebody as a journalist, I have to know this, you know?
Yeah, for instance, so in Florida, you could record, like I could record your conversation with your consent in Florida. In some states, you can't. But I can tell you in the states where you are allowed to record without someone's knowledge, just one person the conversation knows, I can't tell you how many cases that we have won, how many men have been saved by these recordings because the truth comes out.
I know men personally who've gone through that actually. Luckily, I know one guy was on the phone with the police while he was being battered, and then the woman accused him of battery.
Yes.
Now, I guess just last question. You, of course, you know, you run a family. You're a family court lawyer. You're engaged in heavily advocacy for men and boys. If you were to tell people one thing about why you've taken this on, why you think this is
I would tell them because I was raised by a foster accuser. And I, as a child, I would stand, you know, in the courtroom, I would stand in front of social workers, and I would watch my mother say things that were not true. And I felt, personally, I felt the effects of this. And I see the defects in the system, and how women, it's a very differential system. So there's nothing more motivating, I don't think, than having your personal experience. And now I'm in a position where I can bring attention to this. And, you know, there's a lot of men out there that need women to stand up and say, you know what, I've seen this, I've experienced this, and I'm here and I'm happy.
Melissa, Isaac, real pleasure having you on Crossroads.